Hello, Stephan here with Liquidity with a video about what the word romantic and romanticism and romance have to do with the Romans. Where's the connection?
Liquidity.
Were the Romans particularly romantic? What do they have to do with romance? So I would venture to say they don't really have anything particularly to do with romance. Now, were people within the Roman Empire and the Roman Republic romantic people? I'm sure there were no more or no less romantic than other people during those time periods, but they weren't particularly known for being romantic. The Romans weren't really known for being particularly romantic or for inventing or culturing the whole concept of romance. In fact, one of the pervading legends of the Roman Republic and also later the Roman Empire were a story from the very beginning of the Roman Republic, in the very early days of the Roman Republic, when the Romans were just a city-state, when Rome was just a city-state, when they basically ran out of women. They had all these men coming in from all kinds of different places, a lot of them refugees, a lot of them people who maybe have also escaped the legal system in other places, and they had no women. So what did they do? They went to their neighbors, the Sabines, and they stole their women. This story is known as the rape of the Sabines or the abduction of the Sabines, and there are many paintings that commemorate that. So not particularly romantic, at least not in our modern sense of romantic, right? Were there romantic relationships among people in that time period within the bounds of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire? I'm sure, and there are of course love poems, and there are recorded cases of people falling in love and falling out of love, but the Romans were not necessarily romantic or any more romantic than other people. So where does the notion of romanticism come from then? The short answer is it comes much later, not from Romans themselves, but people who spoke the language of the Romans. People who lived in what is today France during the Middle Ages, in especially northern France, when the Arthurian legends were popularized by French writers. And although the Arthurian legends started in Britain, in France was the first time when the whole concept of courtly love and veneration of women, of adoration of women, not just seeing them as an object, as a sexual object, but somebody to be venerated, came about at least within that part of Europe. Now, women were venerated before in different societies, but this is the first time in post-antiquity Europe when we had a whole literary movement dedicated toward that. And this was then popularized not just in France, but also spread throughout other European countries. Now, why am I saying that these people spoke the language of the Romans? So, yeah, throughout the Roman Empire, even long after the Roman Empire fell apart, a lot of people still spoke Latin or a local variety of Latin, a Vulgate Latinate dialect, if you will, which then eventually turned into the modern day Romance languages, such as French and Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and many dialects that are spoken within these different areas. In fact, one country is still named after the Romans, Romania, because Romanian is a Romance language. It's based on Latin. It has its origin in Latin for the most part. In fact, in French and also in German, the word roman or roman means novel. So we still have this idea of a lengthy literary work being referred to as something that has this romance origin. So what is the early medieval genre of romance of the veneration of women, and for the first time in literature, have to do with the Romantic movement. The Romantic movement happened much later in the 18th century. It started in the 18th century, and the only real connection is that Romanticism as a literary movement, also as an artistic movement in general, really venerates or focuses on emotions, everything that can be felt. So it was really a reaction to the Enlightenment, to this whole idea that we can very easily figure out the world simply by rational thought, that everything can be explained by rational thought. There were a lot of people who weren't comfortable with that, so Romanticism came about. In fact, our environmental movement has its early forms or its early origins in the Romantic movement because nature was venerated. This whole idea that you can find God in nature, this idea that you can go into nature, into the woods, into the mountains, and you can see God's wonderful creation. I always think of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, one of the best known novels in Western civilization, as a perfect example of a romantic novel. Here we have a scientist who creates a creature, tries to overcome nature, and all hell breaks loose. The monster is the most unhappy and disgruntled creature that you can possibly imagine, and then fights back against its own creator, has a very, very, very deep grudge, holds a grudge against its own creator because it's not being nurtured for. And in fact, Victor Frankenstein, the scientist who creates the monster, is abhorred by his own creation. So this turn against science and the idea that we can use our minds to overcome nature. No, we should be with nature, not against nature, right? So that's very romantic. I think quintessentially romantic, especially its original form. This is not to be confused with the Romanesque architecture style, which is really just a copy of somewhat older Roman architecture. Romanesque churches are very commonly found throughout Europe, especially Western Europe. Uh, and these were built in the early medieval times for the most part. And yeah, they just had very straightforward arches, rounded arches, often very thick columns, and they lacked the ornateness and the levity of the Gothic cathedrals that came later. So it's easy to confuse these things. Roman, Romance, Romanesque, Romanticism, Romantic, right? They all have something in common in the sense that they have their origins in something that has to do with the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was huge, and it influenced many different people, and the Romans basically forced their language on many of the people that they subjugated, including people from northern France. What is today northern France was back then called Gaul or Gallia. Northern Gallia was conquered by the Romans, and the people were basically forced to speak Latin or had to adapt in order to flourish. And those people who then in the medieval times still spoke a Latin dialect, which was the precursor of modern day French, those were the people who came about with the idea of a romance, in the romantic sense of it, a relationship between men and women, where men actually adored women not just as a sexual object, but as somebody to be venerated. And this is also something that you will see throughout European history and actually Christian history, with the many cathedrals that are dedicated to Our Lady, Mary. In fact, there are two Marys. There's Mary, mother of Jesus, and there's Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene was also highly venerated in France, more so in southern France, but yes, there are many, many, many churches that are dedicated to Mary Magdalene, who was a very close associate to Jesus, we're told. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Check out my other videos about language and languages. If you enjoyed them, consider subscribing to my channel. Hope I'll see you in the next video. Bye.